Hello everyone and welcome to Holistic Healing with Deepshika. Of late I've been doing a lot of thinking, more than usual, so you can imagine how much that is. So much so that my brain is a complete mesh of thoughts, and then some more thoughts. On life, on relationships, on what needs to be done and what needs to change. Thoughts on habits, thinking patterns, and so on and so forth. But if anyone is to ask me what, I would have no answer except I don't know. In fact, I just spent 4 hours with a very dear friend answering all her questions as I don't know. And then there's this one thing that she said that stuck with me. She said, "What do you do when you are done surviving?" To which I, of course, said, "I don't know." And she replied saying, "You thrive." And I have had this topic noted down since ages, living life in survival mode and surviving abusive relationships. So, all, in the midst of the chaos that I am right now, I decided to speak on survival mode. What is survival mode? Survival mode is a state of constant stress and anxiety where our primary focus is simply getting through each day. It's a reactive state where we operate on autopilot, driven by fear, worry, and an overwhelming sense of urgency. In this state, our bodies and minds are constantly on high alert, which can be physically and emotionally exhausting. What does survival mode look like? It can be anything. It can be living in a hyperactive state in your professional life with no time for personal or relationships. It can be finding it easier to lie to manage the situation. It can be constantly walking on eggshells around someone because of how unpredictable they are. It can also be constantly coming with ways and plans for the future because that's a distraction from the present. It can also be totally cutting off from emotions and feelings and simply going through the day and the week and the year. It can be so many things because the human brain will always come up with the best solution to survive. At times, even creating barricades within the brain to stop the person from feeling the extreme pain or create alter egos and such like things that we see as a mental disease, but is simply the brain's way of trying to survive. But I will not get into the medical part of this as I am not qualified to do so. Now, the survival mode is something that the body has come up with to survive a particular part of the life. It is supposed to be a phase and not an entire life. But somehow, we get so comfortable in the survival mode that we forget about it being a phase. In fact, a lot of times we accept it to such an extent that it becomes our life. However, the habits that are created to survive will never help you grow and thrive. You're eventually supposed to muster up the courage and take the risk of getting out of the survival mode. What can being in constant survival mode for years do to the emotional state of a person? Well, for one, it really affects the emotional state of that person. To put it simply, either the person becomes totally closed to emotions or becomes extremely sensitive. In fact, I read somewhere that people with heightened state of empathy are like that because of the constant need to be in the survival mode. Apart from having self-doubts, constantly questioning oneself, poor self-confidence, making oneself small, the person is also constantly tired. Fatigue, lack of happiness, exhaustion, disconnection, trouble focusing or concentrating, having periods of zoning out can also be some of the results of being in survival mode. The stress of it may also eventually manifest into physical ailments like frequent headaches, digestive problems, or a weakened immune system. And then, of course, if not addressed, it may result into bigger or more severe mental issues. Now that I have spoken on what survival mode is and how it impacts oneself, let's move on to how to identify if you are living in a survival mode. Of course, the first thing will be to spend time with oneself. Like just sit and do nothing. Something that I still find difficult at times, and also something that a lot of people will simply shun by naming it as a waste of time. But the fact is that the mind will go to the events, traumas, situations, relationships, etc. that are causing this behavior only when it has enough time to not be distracted. And because not being distracted causes us to have such thoughts and face these fears and insecurities, we often term it as a waste of time and simply not do it. But what it is that needs to be focused upon will only come to you when you simply let yourself be without any distractions. And yes, of course, it takes a lot of courage. Courage to let go of the ego and also to accept where we have been wrong. But more so, to accept that a lot of times, major part of our life that we have built, even relationships that we have nourished and continued to be in, were only a way to survive. The second thing that needs to be done is identify the areas of your life that you neglect or often don't have the time for, and the areas that you always have the time for. For example, you never have the time to sit and have a heart-to-heart conversation with a loved one, even during an altercation, but you always have the time to get into a meeting at work or something similar. Of course, once you have identified such areas, the next step is to understand the why. Maybe it is not the present situation that is causing this particular behavior. Maybe it is an event or trauma from the past. But that's what survival mode is, right? More than not, it continues long after we have physically moved away from the event that actually caused us to get into that mode. For example, a child who has grown up being told that he or she is always going to be a failure or is always going to end up alone, as an adult will remove himself or herself from situations even before it reaches a conclusion, or may get into relationships that are a failure from the start or avoid them completely altogether. It is basically removing oneself from any situation that may cause such an eventuality from coming true. And mind you, this is something that happens at a subconscious level. Once the reasons and behavior leading to survival mode have been identified, what is to be done next is to take conscious efforts and be committed to giving up these patterns. Some of the ways to do that are: first and foremost, prioritize self-care. Taking care of your physical, emotional, and mental health should be a top priority. This may include regular exercise, a healthy diet, adequate sleep, engaging in activities that bring you joy. Next is setting boundaries. Learn to say no and set limits to protect your time and energy. This might mean delegating tasks, cutting back on commitments, or creating a more manageable schedule. Third is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness and meditation can help you stay grounded in the present moment, reducing stress and anxiety. Even a few minutes of deep breathing or mindful walking can make a significant difference. Next is seek support. Never hesitate to reach out for help. This can be from friends, family, or a professional therapist. Talking about your struggles can provide relief and new perspectives. Next is focus on gratitude. Cultivating gratitude can shift your mindset from one of scarcity to abundance. Keep a gratitude journal and regularly reflect on the positive aspects of your life. And lastly, create a vision. Develop a clear vision for your future that extends beyond immediate survival. Set realistic goals and take small, actionable steps towards achieving them. Living in survival mode can feel like an endless cycle of stress and exhaustion. However, by recognizing the signs and taking proactive steps, you can break free and start living a more fulfilling, balanced life. Remember, it's a journey and not a destination. Each small step you take towards self-care and mindfulness brings you closer to thriving. In the end, all I would like to say is that congratulations, you mastered the survival mode. But it's time to level up. Now it's time to live. Thank you for listening and have a great day and week ahead.